Welcome to Season 2, Episode 13 of the Amplified Marriage Podcast. Today, our title is Pick Your Poison. We are talking about some dangerous things that can lead your marriage to divorce. We're back. Welcome to another episode of Amplified Marriage. I'm Brian.
I'm Natalie.
We just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for hanging with us over this last month. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for listening. Thank you for still sending us those emails over this time when we have been gone for about a month. We haven't posted a new episode. That was intentional. We needed to step back, take a break.
Yeah, I think we just needed to not regroup. We're okay. We just had a lot going on outside of the podcast and just with work and stuff. And so we just needed to take that time
and just
to refocus and refocus and kind of get refreshed.
Absolutely. And in that time, we have some really great content coming up for you for the next little while. We have some new interviews coming. We have what we're calling our Pick Your Poison series.
Ooh, you might be wondering what on earth we're talking about. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so in case you missed our last podcast, I mean, we had to even go back because enough times passed that we're like, what did we even talk about? We talked about whether or not your relationship was on autopilot.
Were you coasting?
That's right. Are you just cruising through your relationship thinking everything's okay when at the core things just kind of might be amiss, or you might be sort of interpreting them in a different way than what's actually happening in a relationship? So if you missed that one, I really encourage you to go back and listen. Be some great nuggets of information there for you.
Absolutely. And so we did just mention our new series that we're going into is called Pick Your Poison.
Yeah.
I know it sounds funny. I know it's a weird title. But over the last however many years that Natalie and I have been coaching couples, walking side by side with couples, praying with couples.
And even our own journey.
Even our own journey. Our own journey is filled with some things. And there's probably 20 negative things, 20 things that happen in a relationship that you should just stop doing or cut out of it, or
at least be made aware.
I mean, it's
so
like
that you can change.
It's like if you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so we want to inform you. So the Pick Your Poison is these are 6 things, 7 things, 8 things. Who knows how many the list is going to be? But we have a few weeks lined up of poisons that we believe will ultimately lead to divorce.
Yeah, if left unchecked.
If left unchecked, if left not knowing, if left in a place where it's just happening. And sometimes these things have become so, you've heard us say this many times.
Yeah.
These things that we're going to talk about these next few weeks.
So we're going to be going 2 at a time.
Yeah. So the things that we're talking about these next few weeks are things that should be the exception, but can easily become your normal.
They were our normal for a long time.
Some of them were. Some of them were our normal for a long time. Some of them were things that happen once in a while, but not often, but still things that just needed to be dealt with.
Right. And let's just, before we dig into what we're talking about tonight, you might be thinking, well, I'm not married, so like, how does this apply? This isn't, the things that we're talking about don't just happen within marriages. They happen within relationships. And so that could be a work relationship, right, as far as like employer to employee, or family relationships, friend relationships. So it's not just marriage, but there's some toxic communication patterns. There's some real trouble spots,
right,
that we just kind of want to bring some light to. as far as, these are the two poisons that we've picked tonight to talk about, are criticism and contempt. And we're all too familiar with those two in our own personal life, but it's super important. We did a webinar. And so if you weren't able to connect with us on this webinar, we did 2 separate ones. We're in the process of putting them on the website. So make sure that you check that out. But one of the things that it kind of sparked a trajectory, I think, for us that we're like, we need to, I think, kind of go down this path.
And dig a little deeper into these things.
Dig a little deeper because, even as we were prepping and it was just, we were just spouting off toxic behaviors, I guess. And I'm like, good heavens, like we could do a whole entire series. And that kind of was like, pick your poison came out of that.
Yeah. And a lot of our research tonight and some of the topics that we're talking about came from the Gottman Institute. Just want to give them props.
They're fabulous.
They're a fabulous couple that deals with all kinds of subject matter. It's funny, when we were doing some digging, we've coached couples for a long time now. And oftentimes when we get into doing some research, there's things that we've been saying, hey, you shouldn't do this as a couple. Like we'll use the word criticism, or like you're showing contempt for your spouse, like, or your partner. But oftentimes you go to these places when you're doing study, trying to, like, I want to know more about relationships so I can help more people. Oftentimes these places that, psychologists or marriage counselors, they put labels and put names to some of the things that we've been sharing with couples for a long time. And so
that's right.
The first one the first poison is criticism.
This one's really a big one.
Well, and oftentimes people, you always, in your mind, as soon as we heard this one, or I heard this one, it was like criticism. Oh, it's your boss. Like you do a job and your boss immediately is like, you did everything wrong. You suck at your job. You can't do it. You didn't do the numbers right. Like you ever watch movies, and that's how the critical boss is always like. And so that's the first thing that came to my mind was this, the critical boss.
Yeah.
I don't have a critical boss, by the way. I'm just saying that not now, but in the past.
No, you have had in the past some really nasty bosses.
Absolutely. And so criticizing your partner, criticizing your spouse, is different than offering a voice of critique, or even voicing like a complaint, like, hey, like whatever that complaint may be. The latter two are about a specific type of issue. So if I come to you with a critique, like, hey, when we did this, this kind of thing happened.
You can tweak
and
this,
it's not a criticism. Yeah, you can tweak this to make it better. It's more of a critique.
That's right.
Or a complaint. The two they're about specific issues.
That's right. And criticizing your spouse or your partner, it's
a straight on,
like it's a straight on attack.
Yeah.
At the core of who their character is.
Yeah. So critique and complaint are different. They're about specific things, whereas criticism, being critical, having a critical spirit, is at the core. And oftentimes when you're being critical, you're attacking their character.
Yeah.
So when you are being critical of your spouse or your partner,
you're criticizing.
Yeah, you're criticizing who they are. You're trying to tear apart their whole being.
That's right.
And it's demoralizing.
It really is.
So the important part is to learn the difference between expressing a complaint and criticizing.
And so we pulled this off the Gottman website. So complaint. Here's an example. I was scared when you were running late and didn't call me. I thought we had agreed that we would do that for each other, meaning phone each other. Criticism looks like this. You never think about how your behavior is affecting other people. I don't believe that you are forgetful. You're just being selfish. You never think of others. You never think of me. You've heard us talk about the nevers.
Well, the absolutes, like the
you never, you always.
Yeah, like taking those words out of your vocabulary because they don't leave any room for grace or mercy or forgiveness. They're just like, you never do this.
Yeah.
And you've made up your mind already that you suck at this.
And I would caution that if you're not careful, a complaint can turn into criticizing right quick. And I was just thinking of a story about this, actually, about the running late thing. When I was pregnant.
Oh my goodness, you're going to bring this one up?
Yeah, I am. When I was pregnant with, I don't think I've told this story.
I don't know that you've told it or not, but I've heard it.
You've heard it. And so here's here's how that slippery slope of like complaining about something turned into criticizing you at the end of that. And I back then think I was right. And maybe there's still a part of me today that's like, no, I was in the right. But
yeah.
I wasn't. Okay. So I was pregnant with our firstborn and it was winter time and we had planned to go out on a date. Now, you might not know who we are and kind of we're on time. And we're
if you're
on
5
time.
minutes early, you're 10 minutes late.
That's right.
Our kids know this now.
That's right. So we're very on time. And so we had a reservation for whatever the time was. And I was ready to go and this and that. And about a half an hour before the reservation, you weren't even home and you should have been home by then. So I called your work cell phone and he was a delivery driver at that time. No answer. And I called his work number. So I called the cell phone, I called work, no answer. The store is closed. The business is closed. We're like, it's not so much like, hey, I care about your safety right now. I care about the date that you said we were going on. And so, no answer. Panic set in because we were running late and our reservation was going to go to somebody else. I was so frazzled. And maybe some of you would say, oh, it's just pregnancy hormones or whatever. No, it was right, cray. I phoned the hospital and I asked specifically if a gentleman by his name was brought in because of a car accident or anything like that, because I hadn't heard from him and this, that, and the other. And I was frazzled. They're like, no, ma'am, there's no one here by that name. I was so close to phoning the cops.
I think I want to also bring this up. This is back when cell phones weren't as common as they are now. Not everyone had a cell phone in their pocket. In fact, we didn't even have a cell phone.
No.
I had a work cell phone.
Yeah.
I need you to explain to our listeners the particular point.
So
Thank you.
The phone died. But that, in my mind, here's where I went from, hey, I was scared. Yeah, I was terrified. I was over the top calling the hospital. I was this close to calling the RCMP. And you walked in the door and
did.
I was crying.
And I was like, what is happening?
I think we made our reservation. So it was like sometime in that half an hour, he had made it home and I was bawling. And I said, you never called me. And here I'm left thinking you're in a ditch somewhere dying and we're not going to go on our date, right? It wasn't about it was about the fact that he didn't call, which turned very nasty. It was like, how could you not think that I would have been freaking out on this end with you not phoning? Don't tell me that you couldn't have borrowed somebody else's phone. Don't tell me that what was really going on. Were you actually working? Right. And on and on and on that narrative went, right? So, yes, they're two separate things, but I think you can slip into one from the other really quickly.
And I think I need to point out to our amplified marriage.
I was wrong.
I wasn't going to say it like that, but that was not the only occasion in which Natalie had responded in said way because of her personality. There was another time where I called her at like 5 to 6 and I said, hey, I'm going to be home. We had a customer come in, pick up like 20 pieces right at 6 o'clock, which, you're not supposed to do, but he did. And it took us 40 minutes to get all the pieces unloaded on the truck. The cell phone, again, had died because the technology was not that great back then. Cell phone died and the office phones were shut down. And I rolled in at like 7 o'clock and she had, again, amped herself up. And it went from just being like, hey, you remember when you're supposed to tell me, like, we made this decision together, we'll always communicate?
Old liar.
Yeah. And it went into some pretty harsh and never like, you never call me. And I'm like, but I called you at 5 to 6. So that was literally an hour ago. I called you and said, I'm going to be running.
That's right. But see, my mind went to, he must have been robbed from the time that.
Somehow, the 50 feet from the front door to his car in a well-lit parking lot, he was mugged and robbed with other members of his team with him.
That's right. Hey, so if you find that you are critical of each other or one is more critical of than the other, this isn't like a necessarily like your relationship's going to fail or you're doomed.
What?
This is something to be aware of so that you're consciously working together to fix it.
Yeah, and we're going to give a tips and some ways, like the Gottman Institute calls it the antidote.
Yeah.
We want to give you that.
And
today.
left unchecked, I mean, this poison just flows into the next poison that we're going to talk about. And it's this kind of domino effect. And that's where you end up in some troubled waters. And
so the problem with being critical or having a critical spirit or being criticism is if I can speak English, it becomes pervasive, or it can become your way of life.
That's right.
It's a way, and what it does do is it actually begins the steps towards other deadlier poisons or other poisons to have entrance into your relationship. And we want to help you get away from them. It can make you feel like you've been assaulted or rejected and hurt. And as such, your feelings and the decisions you make are based out of rejection or hurt or those harsh feelings, as opposed to a happy place or making good decisions because everything is healthy and whole.
And so the one that is sort of the perpetrator, I guess we'll call it that, the one who's instigating this kind of toxicity, the more that it happens, it increases in its intensity. And I think that was that domino effect that we're talking about, of it then leading to the person to becoming contempt, like feeling contempt towards their partner, their spouse, their boss, their sibling, their family member, or whatever.
It begins to spiral out when you're being critical. If you're being critical of your spouse and it's left unchecked, it'll eventually start to roll over into other things.
That's right. And let me just say, like, I have had it said to me in the past with people criticizing me, "Oh, I'm just speaking the truth." And it's like, okay, there is a way to speak to people the truth, maybe, that isn't condescending and critical, and they don't walk away feeling worthless and devalued. And so I think that if you're like, "Oh, my spouse isn't really doing that," just think of a time when someone was overly judgmental and just like their whole purpose was to rip you apart, like one side up and the next side down, and then leave you sort of in a mess of a puddle of a mess.
Yeah.
Because
a puddle of a mess, eh?
A puddle of a mess of a puddle?
I don't know.
In a puddle?
I would just say a puddle.
In a puddle. So if you're unsure if that's what criticizing is, I mean, that's how you're left feeling.
Yeah. And so the antidote for this type of thing is to take the word "you," which is very much a criticism thing. It's not a complaint. It's not anything else.
Well, I think you're throwing spears when you start a conversation with
"you did this,
and you make me."
So, Amplified Marriage family, I want you to listen to this, and I want you to just maybe take a minute and think about the times that you, so I can use it there, have maybe done that with your significant other.
That's right.
And in that moment, what was the heart of why you were doing that? Was it because you were trying to get them to, agree to your position, or was it to get them to feel bad that they did something to you? Right? And so it goes from a "you" statement, which
blames.
It points the fingers and you're blaming. And we want in the antidote to change this to an "I" statement. So criticism will say this: you always talk about yourself. Why are you always so selfish? Now that's an interesting one. You are always the one that never takes out the garbage.
Yeah. You're always late.
You're always late. You always eat the last piece of fish.
You never phone. I'm
phone.
always the one that has to phone.
I always have to. You never initiate sex.
Yeah.
I'm always the one that has to do that. Okay.
That's
so
right.
So the criticism is you're pointing the fingers and you're saying you're starting that already with blame laid at their feet, even though they've not even had a chance to say anything.
That's right.
The antidote is,
I'm feeling left out of our talk tonight, and I have things I need to say. Can we please talk about my day?
Yeah.
And so
maybe that's not how you would say it, because that's
No.
pretty. That's kind of like a scripted response.
yeah,
But you're like, hey, do you know what? Can we just? I'm feeling like we've not had a chance to. We say
to
this.
sit down and decompress.
Let's decompress.
Yeah.
And let's talk about some stuff. Okay. And instead, you're saying you're laying. Is it? I'm feeling this way, as saying you never. Right.
Yeah.
You never talk to me. You
I'm-
never talk about what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
You never let me vent.
Right. And I think that's really important to set that time aside. We've managed, like over the years when the kids were little, that was that couch time that you've heard us say in previous podcasts, where we really made deliberate time to talk about our day, not right when you came in through the door, because that's probably not the good time.
No.
But within a half an hour of you coming home, of really taking that time to sit down and say, hey, can we talk about
Right.
my day? Because let me tell you what kind of a day it was.
Right.
Right. And I've said it like that.
And so all these things we have said, criticism can lead to contempt. Oftentimes having a critical spirit, operating in that area of criticism and being that critical person can actually lead to open up the door to other different types of poisons that will eventually can lead to divorce.
Well, that's right. And so I'm pretty sure that we had mentioned like this trust cycle where there's an issue. I'm voicing that issue. You're hearing my concern or you're hearing my complaint, and then you're fulfilling that need.
Yeah.
The same thing goes here when we're talking about criticism, and then now we're talking about contempt. That same thing, when you stop blaming your spouse, you never do this, you always do this, and start saying, hey, I'm feeling left out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just got home and, you know, you're out with the guys already or whatever, of making it personal.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the next one is contempt. And the second one, the poison that we want to talk about is contempt. When we are communicating in a place of contempt, we treat others with disrespect. We can mock them.
Sarcastic.
There's that line of sarcasm, funny, and then sarcasm, you were just being a jerk.
Well, you can tell the difference when someone's being sarcastic, where it's
pointed at you,
funny, and then an underhanded insult.
But we can mock them with that sarcasm. We can ridicule them. We call them names. I think
a rolling of the eyes.
Rolling of the eyes. We mimic them, and like, you know how a kid does. They're like, meh, 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 meh.
Yeah.
And then the kid does it back to you. Like, don't you say that to me in that tone? And then they say it back to you in that exact same tone. The body language, eye rolling, or scoff. You can't see the eye rolls because it's a podcast, but the scoffing. Like,
I'm rolling my eyes right now.
Yeah. You can just Natalie's eyes, they roll up really well. But the whole purpose of contempt, if you've gone from that critical state into contempt, is to feel you feel worthless, like you have less than you anything to offer. You have no value. Yeah, the victim does.
But the perpetrator certainly feels so superior.
Yeah, absolutely. And contempt goes a long ways past criticism.
That's right.
Again, criticism attacks the character.
So it's almost like a self-righteous.
Yeah. And it's a moral superiority or a superiority. It's almost like if you have contempt, you have a superiority complex.
Exactly.
You see this a lot with exceptionally wealthy people when you watch them on the news, or you watch like celebrities that have never known struggle, like being poor or not having any money or not having access to whatever they want, whenever they want.
Yeah.
You oftentimes see almost like a contempt in them. Because they truly feel that they're superior to other people. Mm-hmm. And that's an extreme case. But in a relationship, you could have superiority issue because I'm the alpha male in the house, or I make the most money, or I drive a nicer car than you do, or I'm a better cook, or I clean the house better than you do.
That's right.
Right. So,
and it's so easy if your needs aren't being met. It's easy then to pick that one. And I held this over your head because I went to college and you did not, and so I had would throw that in your face.
But that was bred into you by your family. Your family really struggled with me.
That's true, but I still made the choice to hold that noose around your neck, and I used it whenever it suited me. I love the Gottman Institute's example of this here, because I was reading it. I laughed out loud because she said this to me. I legit said this almost word for word to him, and I'm going to read it to you now. So here is contempt. You're tired? Cry me a river. I've been with the kids all day. running around like mad to keep this house going. And all you do when you come home from work is flop down on that sofa like a child and play those stupid video games. I didn't use idiotic. I was like, those stupid video games. I don't have the time, nor do I want to deal with another kid. Could you be any more useless? Gottman Institute used pathetic, but I'm inserting what I actually said. It's so
that one was hurtful.
Well, no kidding. Reading it now, and I'm like, ugh.
And you know what? Even in our research, other than Gottman, and this is something that we've heard before, that people that are in contemptuous relationships or behave in that way, there's actually science to show that people that have stress, but this becomes a mental health thing. Like the person who's on the receiving end of someone who is filled with contempt or treating them with contempt will likely to suffer some things with infectious illnesses like colds or the flu or sicknesses, just like that.
Yeah.
Because they have a weak immune system because they're stressed and they don't feel like they're worth anything. So they're not, even their body is it's almost like their body is caving in on them as well.
That's right.
Super interesting science behind that.
If you've ever been on the receiving end of that, and I've also been the giver of that, but on the receiving end, I had such like queasy stomach and, when you're nervous or you're anxious and like all the things that happened, and I felt sick and I felt nauseous, and
it's like
I
when
felt
your dad used to call us up and be like, I need to have a chat with you too.
Oh my goodness. It would send me like almost in panic mode.
Right. And so it's
fueled.
Well, contempt is not often as overt or in your face
as someone who's criticizing.
Right. And so the critical spirit or the contemptuous or the contempt spirit is can kind of just simmer under the surface, and it comes out at certain times.
Well, and you've been brooding.
Yeah. And
all those negative thoughts. So all those criticizing things that, because like in our relationship, it went both ways. Like
right.
I was criticizing you because I was trying to get you to change, and you were criticizing for whatever your reasons were. But being on the receiving end of that criticizing, I would stew. So it wasn't that we even dealt with.
Oh no!
The critical.
It was like you know how you what's that saying? We swept it under the rug.
Yeah.
Our rug was about 10 rugs piled on top of on each other that was holding down a mountain of things that we never dealt with.
That's right, and it started to build.
Right.
And resentment started to build, and I couldn't stand the look of you in the room. And do you see how this?
Everything you said was filled with contempt, and I could read that, feel that, knew what was happening.
That's
and
right.
vice versa when it was coming back at you. It's interesting the way they have the way that John Gottman says it this way is that contempt is the single greatest predictor of divorce. And we've coached some couples that one side of it, not even both, but one was the receiver of the criticism and contempt, and the other was the giver.
Yep.
And they are not together. And so contempt is something that, well, it may be...
You can't let it take root.
You can't let it take root. You need to cut it out.
Yeah, it's got to be eliminated.
If you're on the receiving end, you need to stand up to whoever that contempt bully is and deal with it face first, head on, deal with it. It's going to hurt. It's going to be tired. But if you value your relationship, you value your marriage, and you want it to work. And again, we say this all the time. We believe that almost anything you can come back for.
Yeah.
From like, and here's a hard truth, and that some people may not like this, but you can come back from adultery. We've seen it.
We know people,
and we've walked through with couples that have experienced this before. You can come back from some of the worst things in a relationship. Now, there is a breaking point, but what we're saying is that if you are working in this place of criticism and contempt, this is not the end.
No, it doesn't have to be.
No, family, you hear me? This is not the end. Your relationship can be salvaged.
That's right. And the saying that you've heard us say, you teach people how to treat you.
Right.
And so you might be today years old when your eyes have been opened and you've had that enlightenment of, hey, this is not okay.
I don't like how you say that to me. That's rude.
And I do feel like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then this is what sparks that conversation. And if you need to get counseling, we are advocates for getting counseling for this particular thing and being able to understand how to cope. But that teach people how to treat you leads us into this antidote. And that's to build a culture with your partner of appreciation and respect.
I also want to add gratefulness and honor. You adding
That's
those,
so good.
You're adding those things. You're grateful for your spouse. You're going to honor them. And because you're doing those things, you appreciate who they are, what they're doing, and you respect them for what they bring to the relationship. And it's not just, well, you bring good laundry care. You care for my soul. You care for my heart. You care for who I am.
Appreciation goes a long way. It's kind of like one of those things. Have you ever hung out with a negative Nelly? And if your name is Nelly, I do apologize.
Negative
I'm not
Nancy
talking about. Oh, okay. Either way, we're not singling anyone else.
No Nelly or Nancy's.
Right. But when someone's negative all of the time and you're hanging out with them and you're like, it like rubs off on you.
Right.
And you begin to take on those traits. And that whole, I knew a person actually in my life where it was nasty talking about her husband, nasty talking about the pastor, nasty talking about other friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, there was nothing ever good coming out of her mouth. And I think when you start to hang out with people like that, that's how you become. That's what you're feeding and that's what's coming out versus being thankful. Hey, I'm thankful that my husband goes to work faithfully every single day. I am thankful when you begin your day, even though there might be things that your partner is kind of lax, like are messing up because they're not perfect. I think coming at it from that place of I appreciate and choosing to focus on the things that they're doing well.
And if you're building that into a place where you are regularly expressing affection, like one thing that Natalie and I do is I'll never go a day without saying I love you.
Yeah.
We just don't want to, I don't want to leave the house and the last thing she said to me was you didn't brush your teeth instead of I love you or whatever it was. But if you regularly, you build into your relationship, you build that culture, you build a culture of honor, of respect, of appreciation, of gratefulness, and affection. If you do that, you create a positive direction, a positive purpose, a positive force in your relationship that is going to act as a buffer for anything negative that can come in. Because realistically, again, there's science to show happy people and grateful people and appreciative people that live in that kind of culture have healthier, happier lives than those who don't.
That's right.
And so what happens is when the more positive that you feel, the less likely you are going to be able to feel or express said contempt.
That's right. And one negative comment takes 7 positive comments to counter that one negative. Yeah. So just sit there for a minute.
That it's so easy for us to believe the negative instead of the positive about ourselves.
Right. So the power of words is so important to understand.
Right. Like I'm a pretty confident dude. Like I'm confident in myself. I'm fairly confident in my abilities. But there's been times that someone has said something to me that's taken me weeks to process, not to get over. I can get over stuff, but to process and like have to hear other things. No, you did like, you know what I mean? Like have the right words, insert the right words. What are the positive words you need to reinforce that one thing that someone said, just passing conversation.
That's right. And I feel like the more that you can focus on encouraging your partner and not just focusing on the stuff they're doing wrong, when it comes time to have these kinds of conversations, if what's coming out of your mouth is for the majority of the time is like, hey, okay, well, he didn't do this or that, but hey, he did this. And so thank you so much for doing that. When it comes time to be like, let's give the example.
So but how hard is that to do?
It's very hard.
Right?
Like honestly, it is very hard.
But if you're in a culture, you've built a culture in your relationship with your wife, where it's honor, respect, gratefulness.
I had to train myself.
You have to retrain your relationship. You have to retrain how you approach each other.
That's right.
Man, we had a lot of retraining to do.
Big time. So Contempt says this. You forgot to load the dishwasher again. Ugh, you're so lazy. And then I roll.
I feel like
I've said this.
I feel like, yes, you have.
That's how come I can repeat it so well.
Yeah, right? You know it verbatim. You didn't even have to read the words. But the antidote to this is I understand that you've been busy lately, or however you want to say it.
Yeah.
Could you just take a minute and remember to please load the dishwasher? And when I work late, I'd really, really appreciate that. Like for us, it's dinner. Natalie sometimes has to work this weird shift from 5 until 7 because she's a vocal coach. And so sometimes, not even all the time, because sometimes I'm still working.
Yeah.
But those times that I'm not, I'll come home and make a dinner for her, or vice versa when I'm working late. But it's just, hey, can you please do this for me? Or can you get groceries? I don't have time.
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning, can you please remember I need snacks for us and the kids?
Yeah.
Like even this last week, right?
That's right.
But instead of saying you suck, remember when that one time I said this one thing to you, and how can you not remember now?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And I've said that too. This is all too personal here, these poisons that we're talking about. But see, that antidote works so much better because you're expressing an understanding right off the bat. You're not coming at it from a place of attack.
Yeah, because you're not, again, we're removing the you language or the,
That's right.
you never do this. You're removing that and saying, hey, look, this would really be helpful for me. Could you please help me out with this?
That's right. And it ends with a respectful request.
But it's also it's not just in the language. It's also in the tone.
Tone plays a huge part.
Especially with you and your face.
My face says it all, which is, good
and bad.
And not so good.
But her face will, even if she's saying sometimes nicely, when she's already been pushed to that point, because I'm a challenger and I challenge things. But when she's been pushed to this particular brink, her eyes are saying many things and her face is saying things, but the tone that's coming out is different than what her eyes and her face are saying. Yeah.
There's a lot of lip compressions. And if you don't know what that is, that's when you press your lips together really tightly because you're biting back
all the
biting words.
And sometimes he's successful and other times not so much.
That's right. But it's so important when you're having a respectful conversation that you're ending with appreciation.
Right. And so the antidote is to treat each other with, again, the culture of honor.
That's right.
Culture of respect.
Yeah.
Culture of appreciation, a culture of gratefulness. And it takes time.
It does. And you can retrain because, hey, I retrained myself.
And I still sometimes suck.
Yep, so do I.
And the thing is I'm not one for just giving away compliments. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's something that I had to learn that my team that I work with at church has said to me before, that when you say good job, they're like, that's like high praise. I'm like, what?
That's right.
I could have sworn I gave you more than that before, but I've had to actively to work in my relationship with my kids as well, because I have different personality kids.
Yep.
One will come to me and I'll be like, hey man, that was really good. And that will feed him for a month. The other one needs a bit more affirmation regularly. And we're still working out with my daughter. She's kind of an in-betweener right there.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and it's just like that love language, right? And words of affirmation is not on our top of love languages. And so for me, but that doesn't mean that I don't need it.
No, and that's the thing, is that just because it's not on a list that you took for the 5 love language test, that all of a sudden, and that's not a thing you need.
I want to know that I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
Even though I don't need that to fuel me doing a good job.
Right.
I like to know that I'm all right. I'm on par here.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I didn't suck this week.
Right. Yeah.
All is going well.
Thanks.
Man, that feels so good.
Right.
But it's not, you're coming from a place of respect. I think that if anything, the antidote for even criticism, the antidote for contempt, even the antidote for some of these other ones that we're going to get into, part of the antidote is just treating the other person like they're like a person.
Yeah.
Like they have feelings and they have
and they're
thoughts,
valued.
and they're valued and they have ideas. If you do that, because oftentimes when you're behaving out of a place of contempt and being criticism, it's all about you. Yeah. It's all about how you're feeling in the moment. It's not about the other person.
Yeah.
Right. And so we want you to come at your spouse or your significant other, your fiance, boyfriend, girlfriend with an attitude of respect and an attitude of honor.
So just to clarify or to wrap up a critical or criticism spirit, the antidote is a gentle startup, right? Not you this and you that, but rather I feel this.
Starting
and
with the fingers pointing, you're just starting up gentle. I like how the Gottman and Stu puts it that way.
Yeah.
It's a gentle startup.
And with contempt, your antidote is building a culture of honor and respect. And I think that should be the very foundation that one is building a relationship upon. And
it's surprising how often that's not the foundation that people have in their relationships.
That's right. And sometimes it takes a little while to realize. I mean, we had to loop around that mountain. And then we came back and we're like, okay, we have to start from the ground up. And so it starts at a place, a basis of honor and respect.
Right. Absolutely. And so we have a few more poisons that we want to go through along
That's
with you.
right.
We want to give you the what can happen and what's going to happen if you apply the antidotes. I like the
right.
antidotes to the poison. So if you have been enjoying our podcast, as we know you have, because you guys have been downloading and you've been listening
That's right.
and
We
sharing.
so appreciate that.
Oh man, that means so much to us. Just let people know about us. We appreciate that. You can follow us on Instagram and on Facebook. And you hear us say this all the time. We love to hear from you. If you have a topic or a question or anything you would like us to discuss, here's what I want to do. If you send me through our website, we have a voicemail option on the bottom right. If you send me a voicemail through the website, we will take that and we will ask that question in a bonus episode. We're going to do a question and an answer from people, from you, our Amplified Marriage listeners. You send me a voicemail, you send me an email, you send that to us. We're going to do a bonus episode of question and answer specific. It can be on any topic relating to relationships and marriage or anything like that. And we will do our best to answer that, have an amazing bonus episode, but start sending those questions in, and we'll do that in the next month coming up.
That's right. And you can send us an email at amplifiedmarriage@gmail.com.
And as you hear us say, even if you are struggling with criticism, with contempt, yes, you've heard us say all the time, we believe that marriage can be reset,
refreshed,
recharged,
and restored.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Talk to you soon.